In this lecture, we are going to be writing our very first program. But before we proceed, before we begin writing the program, we need to set up our computer so that we'll be able to carry out our C coding in this C programming language. Now, to set up your computer, we need to have the following on the computer. We need to have a computer, a machine that is running a Linux operating system, because I am using a Linux operating system. So to follow along with me in this lecture, you need to have a computer that is running a Linux operating system. And any text editor will do, but I'm using Sublime Text 4 as my own text editor. Also, since you are on a Linux, you need a GCC compiler. You need a GCC compiler to compile the C source code that we are going to write in this particular lecture series. So if you're using a Windows computer, you can install Linux OS on a virtualization software such as VirtualBox. So you can get a VirtualBox, install VirtualBox on your Windows computer, and then you can proceed to install a Linux operating system as the guest operating system on the Windows machine. So you don't need to partition your computer and do any dual boot. So you can just get a virtualization software and then install your Linux operating system on the virtualization software such as VirtualBox or even VMware. So any of the virtualization software will do. And also there are good tutorials on YouTube to show you how to accomplish all this. So just if you just go to YouTube and just search for how to do any of this task, how to install Sublime Text 4. The first thing, how to install VirtualBox and have a Linux operating system. Early Linux will do. You can either make use of Ubuntu or any good Linux OS will do. So you can Google and see which Linux operating system will be suitable for you. For me, I'm using Pop OS operating system. So let's proceed and create our first program, which is a program that will simply print out a line of text. So right now I am on my Sublime Text editor. Let me close this. So I am on my Sublime Text editor. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to create a file. So I'll just save. I'll Control S. I'm going to save. Then I'll go to. I'm going to I have a folder that I created. I'll just come here, YouTube, and then I can come here under lectures. This is where I'm going to be saving my files. I'll create my program as my first program.c. So I'm going to call it first.c. So our C files have to have this .c extension. So I'm naming my file first.c. I'm going to save it. So I'll save. Now I have saved it. So I'm going to, now I can begin writing my C code. So the first thing that I'm going to show, show how to make use of a comment. Now it's good for us to be commenting our program. Any good program should be properly commented. Now a comment is just a statement showing what the program is all about. What are some lines of code achieved on that particular program? For instance, in this particular program, I can write my comment as the name of the program. I can write this is first.c, program 1. Let me call it program 1. Program 1, first.c, first.c, first.c. So this is what we call end of line comment. End of line comment in the sense that it begins and ends in one single line. As you can see, in line number 1. Also, these are line numbers. These line numbers are not part of our program. They are just a feature of the text editor, so as to make our code more readable. So we can turn it on, we can turn it off. So it is good to have for us to have these line numbers for reference purpose. I can just say line number 2, line number 3 to pinpoint some certain things. Okay, so this is line number one, program one, and the name of my program is first.c. So if I want to continue commenting in the second line, I have to put this forward slashes again, because I say this is an end of line comment. It begins and ends in one line. So I can write a little description. This program prints simply print a text. Simply print a line of text. So we just want to write a very simple program to show how to write C programs. And this program, what this program will do, is just simply print out a line of text. That is what we are going to do. So I have written comment to help me so that anyone seeing this program, as soon as he read line number one, read line number two, he knows what this program is all about. So the first thing that next thing that I'm going to write is what we call I'm going to import some header files. So I'm going to write hash include stdio.h. Now line number 5, I'm importing a header file, and the name of that header file is called standard input output header file. That is the full meaning of the stdio, standard input output header file. Now a header file is a file, is a C file. It's a file that consists of C codes that contains functions, function prototypes that we are going to use in our program. So our program, we might want to use some functionalities in our program, and those functionalities have already been coded in the C standard library. So the C comes with what you call a standard library. Just as we got library and borrow books, in C standard library we borrow codes that we may need to use in our program. And this is one instance of we borrowing some code functionalities. So there's what you call in programming, there's what you call a function. We'll come to that. A function is a unit of a program, a modular unit of a program that is performing a particular task. So this standard input output contains some functions that we need to get our program running, like the print format and the scanf scan format that we are going to use. So and for us to make use of those functions, we need to first tell the compiler that we are using those functions, and those functions are in the standard input output header file. And this is what we call a preprocessor directive. So any line of code that begins with this hash symbol, hash include, I can say any line C program line of code that begins with hash, we refer to that as a preprocessor, in the sense that before our program compiles, this has to be processed first. This has to be processed first before our program compile. So it is the first thing that the computer does. So before the compiler compiles our program, it has to go to those header files, import those functions that we need, that our program need from those standard input output header file, fetch those functions and make them available to this our code, so that our code will compile properly without having any error. So if we use those functions without importing this header file, then our program will definitely yields an error, because it doesn't know about those functionalities, because we didn't define them. We are only trying to use them when we have not created them. So we are telling the preprocessor now that we are using these functions, and these functions are in this header file. The name of the header file is standard input and output header file. Go to that particular header file, get those functions, make them available to this program, so that our program will compile properly. All right. So this line number 3, line number 4, I left them empty. Now this is what you call a white line. In programming, any blank line that we left is called a white line. A white line will help our program, will make our program more readable. So it improves our program readability. so that our program will not be compacted in one place. As this white space make our program to be more readable. All right. So now the next thing that I'm going to write, I'm going to define a function, and that function is called main. Int main void. And function main. All right. So sorry, excuse me. So line number 8, we define a function. As I have said earlier, function is a unit of program that performs a particular task. So in every C program, we must define, put our code within a function called function main. And this is how we define function main. The return type, usually a function, performs some certain task, and it may return a result, or it may not return a result. So if it returns a result, we need to specify the type, the data type that it return the result, that the result is going to be. So if that particular function perform a task, I return a data type, then we need to return something. I'm mixing things up. I return something. Then we need to specify what is the data type of that thing that the function returns. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is that this function main is going to perform a task. And at the end of that task is going to return a result, and the result is going to be of int data type. And int stands for integer, and we know integer, they are just numbers without a fraction, without the fractional part. So integer, a whole number, so it's going to return a whole number at the end when it has finished performing its task. So that is what we are trying to see. And then the name of the function is function main. And a function also might need something to perform its task, or it might not need anything. So if it needs something, an input to perform its task, we need to specify the input within this parenthesis where we wrote void. So we need to specify, we need to give it that particular input that it needs to perform a task. But in this case, our function main doesn't need anything to perform a task. That is why we wrote this keyword void. This keyword void to specify that our function main does not need anything. So I'm going to add some comment here as well. Function main begins program execution. So function main begins program execution. So every C program must have function main for it to function, for it to run. All right. So the next thing that we are going to do, and also we also have our end of line comment here, and function main. So it is good at the end of any particular function to specify, so that whenever we see our program will consist of several braces. We make use of brace. This type of it's called a brace. We have an opening brace here, and we have the closing brace here. So at the end of every closing brace is good programming practice to specify what that particular brace is for. So we know that this brace is for this function main. So I wrote it as end of function main. So this closing brace is the end of function main. All right. So what we are going to do, we can proceed to print out our line of text by making use of what we call print format. And now this this is a function. As I have said earlier, we are going to make use of some function from this standard input output header file. Now this is called print format. And what it does, it just print out a text on the screen. That is what print format is going to do, and it is from this particular header file, standard input output header file. We didn't create it. We are only calling the function to make use of it. So as we proceed in programming, we might make use of several header files, some function within program header files. So all we need to do, we need to import those header files in our program, and then we can use the functions that have been defined in those header files. Like print format has been defined in the standard input output header file, and now we are calling that function confidently to make use of it. And what print format does, it just print out a text. So we are going to specify the text that we want this print format to print out for us. So I'm going to specify it by enclosing it within a double quotation mark. This is how we enclose a string within a double quotation mark in C programming. So I'm going to write what I want it to print out for me. Congratulations. Congratulations. You have written your first C program. You have written your first C program. So what I want the print format function to print out for me is just this particular message, this particular text. Congratulations, you have written your first C program, right? So this is how our first program is going to be. I will save it. Now I'll go to my text. I'll go to my command prompt. A terminal, we call it terminal. Linux language, you call it the terminal. So I'll just come to the terminal here, and then I'm going to now run this particular code, compile it, and then run it. So I'm going to clear the screen. I'm going to navigate. I'm going to, let me increase this. Okay, so I'm going to navigate to the folder where I have this particular folder. cd ls command lists simply lists out the content of a folder, of a directory. All right, so I'm going to navigate to this this particular folder. All right, so I'll let you. So now I'm going to ls. All right, so we can see we have our first.c within this particular folder. So now I'm going to compile it using the GCC compiler. So if you're using Linux, if you are new to Linux, and then you need to learn some commands to make use of Linux, I'm going to post a link to some tutorials I created on some basic Linux command to get you up to speed on how to make use of Linux computer effectively. So I'm going to post the link to some tutorials on basic Linux command that I have created. So first.c, for us to compile this first.c using GCC compiler, all we need to do, I'm sure by now you might have installed the GCC compiler. So all you have to do is just specify GCC, and then now you specify the name of the file that you want to compile, first.c, and then output. We want to output it the name that we want to the compiled file, the name of the compiled file that we want the GCC compiler to create. So I'm just also name it first without the .c extension. So GCC first.c. First.c is our C file, and then -o, the name that we want it to be outputted as. So -o flag is used to specify the name that we want the final compiled output to be in. So I wanted my compiled file to be named as first. So I'm just going to hit enter, and then if there's any error, then the GCC compiler will point out to me that there's an error, and then I'll go back to my code and debug my code to remove the error. So debugging is the process of removing errors. So that is why I call it debug. So if there's any error, so in this case we don't have any error, as GCC compiler has successfully compiled our first.c. If I just enter ls command to list out the content of this directory, you can see that we have a new file in green, first.c, meaning that it is an executable file. So to run it, all I have to do in Linux, I'm going to put this dot and then /, and then I'm going to write the name of the program first, which is the name of the compiled file that I want to run. I'm going to hit enter, and as we can see, it has successfully printed out the message that we want it to print out for us. Congratulations, you have written your first C program. So congratulations to us, and congratulations to us for starting for going through this C programming lectures. Thank you.